For Massachusetts Democrats, running for office usually means kissing the ring of organized labor and hoping union endorsements follow. In a tough race, union support can be pivotal. Think of Elizabeth Warren's win over Scott Brown in 2012 or Marty Walsh's mayoral victory last year. But in the primaries, labor's influence is harder to peg. In part two of our focus report, WGBH News reporter Reilly looked at several key races where the mantle of union champion is up for grabs.
The race for Attorney General might be the most intriguing contest in the Democratic primary. Maura Healey and Warren Tolman both have strong organizations, and they've shown impressive skill on the stump. But while the AG's race is a dead heat, Tolman has one advantage. Most of the major unions have endorsed him, including the Massachusetts AFL-CIO, which just happens to be led by his brother, Steve Tolman. And Tolman was just endorsed by Boston Mayor Marty Walsh, a former union leader himself. But Healey insists that she can appeal to union voters, too.
I'm the daughter of two union members. My mom was a nurse, my dad head of his teachers union. I recognize the significance and the importance of labor in our economy, in our democracy.
So do you think that whoever gets whichever endorsements, you're going to be able to get a decent share of the rank and file union vote?
Well, we'll see. I sure hope so.
But in the governor's race, labor may be less influential. Frontrunner Martha Coakley has raked in more high-profile union endorsements. But Steve Grossman says that isn't as impressive as it sounds.
No candidate received the endorsement of the AFL-CIO. They decided not to endorse because they had two really solid candidates whom they believed in.
And Grossman adds, his supporters in labor know he's a natural ally.
My relationship with building trades has been strong. I've chaired the Mass School Building Authority and shown an understanding of how to put working men and women back to work. And we've helped create over almost 10,000 jobs per year in the last 10 years.
Which means that in the Democratic race for governor, organized labor may not play Kingmaker after all. Like the AFL-CIO, Mayor Walsh hasn't endorsed any of the three Democrats. But he says we will see labor flex its political muscle in November.
If labor gets behind that Democratic nominee, they certainly are a powerful force. They proved it in the governor's reelection campaign. They proved it in Elizabeth Warren's campaign. They proved it in Senator Markey's campaign, and they had a little bit to do with mine as well.
Obviously, getting a union's endorsement doesn't mean you're going to get the votes of its members. Remember in 2010 when Scott Brown beat Martha Coakley for that U.S. Senate seat, in part by peeling away votes from a lot of individual union members who were supposed to be backing Martha Coakley.
It wasn't just union members, though.
It wasn't just union members. I'm not sure there's a candidate running in the primaries or even in the general who's capable of doing
what about Charlie Baker in general?
Charlie Baker in the general, assuming he's the nominee, as he probably will be, he's going to get the nomination like last time around of some of the public safety unions. You know, a lot of law enforcement is very critical of and distrustful of the Patrick administration. And I assume he's going to get the votes from a lot of centrist or conservative centrist Democrats who think the government is too big and out of control and want, a check and balance on Beacon Hill. But I don't think Baker has that same populist appeal that Brown did, and he's probably not going to replicate Brown's ability. All
right, Adam. Good story. Thanks a lot. All right, so what role will labor have in the upcoming primary on Tuesday? Chris Condon is the political and legislative director of SEIU Local 509. Welcome to Greater Boston. Of course, that's the Service Employees Union. So your union has decided not to endorse anyone for the governor's race. Why not?
Yeah, I mean, we went through a process. We actually invited, at the time, there were 5 Democratic candidates, and we invited Charlie Baker as well. We invited our members to come, have dinner, sit, and talk to the candidates. When we went through that process, we've got a long history of working with the Attorney General, Martha Coakley, with Treasurer Steve Grossman, and even, Don Berwick, all made good impressions, and, just made the decision to, sit out the primary and be ready to go on Wednesday.
Well, in all honesty, an endorsement for your union, does your rank and file fall in lockstep with that? Or do they look to you for guidance? I mean, do you have any measure of that whatsoever?
Yeah, I mean, to answer the first question, absolutely not. I mean, that's one thing that we've learned. If we take the approach of going to our members and saying, this is who we've endorsed, vote for them, they get turned off.
Exactly.
I mean, there's even the phrase when we make endorsements, we hope you'll check out all the candidates, and we think you'll agree that, in the AG race we endorse Warren Tolman, that Warren Tolman best will represent you and your family. And then we try to explain those reasons. We present questionnaires. We give them the chance to actually sit down and interview. I think that is one thing that, unions increasingly have learned, is that, this idea that you can just sort of, here's your slate, you vote for them isn't going to work. So you need to have conversations. You need to be able to talk to people, just as candidates do. We need to do the same thing from a union perspective.
All right, let's bring David Bernstein into the discussion. He's a WGBH News political analyst and contributing editor to Boston Magazine. So in this day and age, really, are we overestimating the influence of unions? I mean, after all, we've seen some really ugly business right here in the city of Boston anyway, pushback with all kinds of unions, from police to firefighters and others. And it's not that they still don't vote as a bloc. I don't know if they vote more than everybody else, but they don't seem to have the clout that they once did.
Well, I think that some of what Chris was just saying is true, that it isn't the same as it used to be, where you go to someone for a slate, whether you're talking about your union boss or your precinct captain or the woman at the Y or whatever who you used to go to. That just doesn't happen now. And a lot of that lesson was learned in that Scott Brown race. I remember talking to a number of labor leaders, Frank Callahan, for instance, with labor in central Massachusetts, and they were really feeling like, we've taken it too much for granted that we can sort of put out word of who we want them to vote for. We have to do a much better job of educating our members about why we're saying this. So you see a lot of that. I think the influence varies by election. In the Boston race, frankly, I thought that there might have been as much counter to the union organization by people who were afraid of having.
Exactly.
But it turned out that nobody could really coalesce that much organization around the anti-labor movement, and the labor movement was very, very effective about generating interest and getting people knocking on doors and getting out to vote and making their case in that small sort of field.
This is projected to be one of the all-time record low voter turnout elections. Do you have any idea, election to election, how many of your membership votes?
Yeah, no, absolutely. We actually just at the start of this year did a thorough analysis looking at each of our members. I mean, you can
ask them.
No, you can check. Just like we could look.
You do it on voter rolls.
Yeah, we do it on voters.
Right.
We would look up yours and David's and see. Yeah, what we found is that our members, in most cases, vote at a little bit higher rate.
Yeah.
Somewhere from 4 to 6 points. And what we're trying to do in this election is actually look at those who underperform, those who aren't voting that should be,
and what do you do?
Figuring out, have
Strike
conversations. And we'll call them, we'll knock on their door on election day. And that's work we're even doing now, even though we haven't endorsed. You get people in the habit of voting, it becomes something they do regularly.
But do you try to educate them at the same time? Because, people are just kind of willy-nilly voting.
And that goes to David's point, is that's what we have to do. If we can't expect that, one postcard mailing. So we try to have phone conversations. We try to have, meetings after work, on weekends, bring people together. And what we've realized is people don't want to hear from me. They want to hear from members. They want to hear from their coworkers, just like voters.
David, I really wonder about the union influence this time around, because I think there's kind of let's face it, the die is cast in terms of the Republican side of this. So that's going to be extremely low, but Charlie's going to end up. And then maybe a little bit on the Democrat side, too, because if the latest poll is accurate, Martha Coakley has a 32-point lead over Steve Grossman, and more than that over Don Berwick.
Well, and you wonder, how would things have come out if Labor had gotten more involved in one way or another?
You would endorse their place,
But, it was interesting. Early on, there was a sense that maybe Labor would get very much behind Martha Coakley. They did, to a large extent, I think a larger extent than this time around, when she ran for Senate in 2009. And that was part of the reason why Steve Lynch, for instance, ended up not running, because the Labor wasn't there. But it's also true that Labor, and I'm not speaking to your group necessarily specifically, but Labor was very much behind Steve Grossman to a large extent in his primary that same year, 2010, helping him win over Steve Murphy, who, so, I think that you had this situation where, it's no accident that Martha Coakley's campaign manager, Tim Foley, is a former SEIU 1199, I believe, person. But that did not guarantee that all of SEIU came along for her. So, you've seen a lot in this election of people sitting out the primary and saying, we'll let that work itself out, and then we'll get involved in the general.
Well, Chris, what do your membership get out of this? I mean, do they get satisfaction? Do they get, well, I mean, if their candidate wins, I mean, really, what's the difference?
Yeah, no, I mean, I think in many cases, our members, particularly we represent social workers, early education providers and so forth, and they look at it sort of from the global perspective and see it as, they're looking for somebody that shares their values around, investing in early childhood education, investing in lowering DCF caseloads, investing in the work they do in the people that they care for. So it's really that sort of global picture in trying to improve the lives of the people that they care for.
I'll tell you something else too, is that particularly with the service employee representing unions, they represent a lot of minorities, a lot of Hispanic workers, a lot of black workers who work in the service industries, who the Democrats this year are going to have a difficult time motivating to get out to vote in November. They don't have a Deval Patrick or a Barack Obama at the top of the ticket. And there's a lot of thought that it is going to be the labor unions, to some extent, who are going to help to motivate some of the minority voters to get out to vote, and then presumably what the Democrats are hoping is that once they're there, they will vote for the Democrats.
All right, David Bernstein, Chris Condon, thanks so much for coming.
Thank you.